Hello and welcome to the National Writer Series celebration of Black History Month. We have an incredible night in store for you. My name is Marshall Collins and I'm a council member of Northern Michigan E3, which stands for Educate, Elevate, and Engage. We work to dismantle racism and systems of racism. I am honored to introduce tonight's panel, but first I'd like to extend a huge thank you to all of the sponsors who make it possible to bring important authors, hosts, and conversations like this to the National Writer Series stage. We are so grateful for the sustaining sponsorship of Cordia and the winter-spring season sponsorship of today's Golden Fowler Home Furnishings. Thank you for our arts benefactor sponsor, Northwest Michigan Arts and Culture Network, and to our literary sponsors tonight, Northern Michigan E3, and our wonderful Traverse Area District Library, whose mission is to provide dynamic resources and innovative services to stimulate intellectual curiosity, facilitate lifelong learning, promote literacy, and nurture personal enrichment. Our list of thank yous does not end there. Our supporting sponsors are Amacall, Cherry Capital Airport, Image 360, and Traverse Repro Copy Central. Our major media sponsor is the Record Eagle. Supporting media sponsors are Interlochen Public Radio, Midwest Broadcasting, Northern Express, and Traverse Area Community Media. Our supporting partners are Horizon Books, Northwestern Michigan College, and Traverse Area District Library. And finally, our grantors are the National Endowment for the Arts and the Michigan Arts and Culture Council. We truly could not do this without all of you. In celebration of Black History Month, we have 4 amazing authors taking the virtual stage tonight. Honorée Fanonne Jeffers is a poet, essayist, and novelist. She's the author of 5 critically acclaimed books of poetry, including The Age of Phillis, which won the NAACP Image Award for Outstanding Literary Work in Poetry, and the Lenore Marshall Poetry Prize. She teaches creative writing and literature at the University of Oklahoma. The Love Songs of W.E.B. Bois is her first novel, among others. And it's also a New York Times bestseller and an Oprah Book Club pick. Wanda M. is the acclaimed author of All Her Little Secrets, which has been praised by Karin Slaughter as a brilliantly nuanced. It is named as one of the best books of 2021 by Hudson Booksellers and selected as the #1 top pick for library reads by librarians across the country. Wanda is a member of Sisters in Crime, Mystery Writers of America, and Crime Writers of Color. A corporate attorney, Wanda has worked in the legal departments of some of America's top Fortune 100 companies. She is married, the mother of 3, and lives in Atlanta, Georgia. Vanessa Riley is the award-winning author of Island Queen, a Good Morning America buzz pick. Riley's historical novels showcase the hidden histories of Black women and women of color, emphasizing strong sisterhoods and dazzling multicultural communities. She holds a doctorate from Stanford University, plus a bachelor's and master's in mechanical engineering from Penn State University. Yet her love of history overwhelmed her passion for math and has led to the publication of over 20 titles. Our host tonight is returning favorite of the National Writer Series crowd and an author herself. Rochelle Riley had nearly 20-year career as an award-winning Detroit columnist before she started a new adventure in 2019 as the City of Detroit's Director of Art and Culture. She now guides the city investment in the creative economy and transformative innovation. She is the author of 5 books, including The Burden, African Americans and the Enduring Impact of Slavery, and That They Lived, African Americans Who Changed from the World. An avid traveler, she never stays at home. Not for too long. She has visited 28 countries and 33 states and counting. There is so much more we could say about these remarkable women and their books. but it will be even better to hear it from them. Please join me in welcoming Honorée, Wanda, Vanessa, and Rochelle. We hope you all enjoy tonight's conversations.
Well, that was very nicely done. Thank you so, so much. I am thrilled to be here tonight with you again for the writer series. And I am thrilled to be here with Wanda Morris, who was born in Cleveland and studied law at Case Western, and Vanessa Riley, who was born in Aiken, South Carolina, and studied engineering at Penn State and Stanford, and Honorée Jeffers, who graduated from Talladega College and got her MFA from the University of Alabama and is now a distinguished professor at the University of Oklahoma. All over the place we all are, girls, but what we know for sure is that these three women have written brilliance about three women, two fictional, one not, all now indelible characters in American literature in very different, beautiful ways. And I want to start, Wanda Morris, with you and Elise Littlejohn, because my first question for all three of you is every story begins with the seed, you know, an idea, a moment, something that gets you to the place where you're ready to start writing. Where did you start with all her little secrets?
Oh, wow. So Elise Littlejohn, the protagonist in my book, is a Black female corporate lawyer. So obviously I didn't stretch very far because I am a Black female lawyer in corporate America. However, she was a character that kind of rambled around in my head for a couple of years. And I think it was because I had worked with women who had gone through some of the experiences that are depicted in the book. I have personally experienced some of the things that are in the book. And so when I set out to write it, I thought, oh, how interesting, I can tap into these experiences. And when I got about 75% into the book, I stopped and put it away because I started to think, nobody is going to want to read a story about a Black female middle-aged woman who works with these awful people. But I'm glad I picked it back up several years later and got back to work on it. But yeah, she had been somebody who I've seen, I've been, and so I thought how interesting to write about my experiences, and those are people I knew.
And how lucky we are that you did. And Vanessa, thank goodness that you fell in love with Jane Austen in the 1800s. Talk to us about how you came to write about this amazing woman, the Island Queen.
As you say, I am that girl. I'm the nerd girl. I love Jane Austen. My mother stressed the formal literature, so Shakespeare, no Tolstoy. But we, you know, those kind of things, Wadsworth, a lot of the ancient poets. And then one day she drops Jane Austen on me, and, you know, everybody knows Pride and Prejudice, and some know Emma. But by the time you get to Mansfield Park, you begin to realize this woman is not just writing about relationships, she's writing about social commentary and politics. And by the time you get to Sanditon, if you get to Sanditon, the wealthiest woman is a West Indies woman from the Caribbean. And the question was, is this a figment of a progressive writer's imagination, or was this a real person? Now, anybody knows Jane's history, she often took people that she knew, changed the names for the innocent. There is a real Mr. Darcy out there. I'm just putting it out there. But as I was trying to, the 1750s, 1830s is my jam. I love this time period. But often there was no space unless you were telling the American enslavement story. My people are from America, but they're also from the West Indies, from Trinidad. And the dirty little secret, or sweet secret, about the sugar is that 75% of the world's economy was driven during this time frame by the West Indies. So you think of sugar, you think of coffee, all these different things, but there was no space for these stories. And so I went on a 10-year quest to find Miss Lamb. And I ended up finding a political sketch by a man named Gilroy. Gilroy is an ist. He's a misogynist. He's a sexist. Any other ist you want to add, that man just checks those boxes. When he draws women we're the subject of all ill in his cartoons. When he gets to draw a Black woman, he throws in not only that, but all the stereotypes. So big noses, crazy features, talking about Mass is so cute, all these kind of things. But this picture of Prince William Henry, future King William IV, is embracing a Black woman in a hammock, and the picture is loving, and the woman is drawn beautifully. She's not the joke in this piece. She's the tattle. So I knew by following Prince William Henry, his career, I would find who this woman was. And I found her. Her name is Dorothy Kerwin Thomas. She's an amazing woman. She was famous during her day, but systematically erased because of the achievements. She bought her freedom from enslavement. She buys the freedom for her family. She goes on and builds businesses across the West Indies. She's the Oprah of her time. She's funding schools in London. She's sending all of her grandkids to school in Scotland and Ireland because she knows that's going to open up the world. But yet this woman is systematically erased. And I am very fortunate to tell her story. And like Wanda, I didn't think the world was ready for this story. I had an editor who's very brave, who said, we're going to do this story. We're going to focus on Dorothy, not the mistress of the prince, not some other pairing. We're going to spotlight this Black woman and show what she accomplished, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
And well done, it was. I'm telling you, I'm stunned. Journalists think they know everything, and I knew nothing about this woman and wanted to just slap myself. And I'm like, there's one more hidden figure, hidden story that shouldn't have been hidden. So thank you. And Honorée, I want to turn to you because Ailey Pearl Garfield, who lies at the heart of a saga and whose story is a metaphor for lineage. And there was a passage early on in the book that just literally made me burst into tears. Talk to us a little bit about where that idea and where that started, the Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois.
Well, all of my people are from, first, before I say that, let me just say I'm just so honored and just filled with joy to be in this gathering of such accomplished Black women. I'm just hoping at some point we can all meet in person. It's just a real blessing for me. My people are from Eatonton and Milledgeville, Georgia. I was just real excited about Wanda's backstory. My late sister, Sidoni, was a lawyer, and she graduated from Howard University Moot Court Law Review. So anytime I meet a Black woman lawyer, just makes me just think about CC. I am a student of history. I'm an elected member of the American Antiquarian Society. Not a lot of Black women are elected members of the American Antiquarian Society, but I first started really diving into the historical archives back when I was in my early 20s. And so I've been in the archives and been a student of history for that time. And just to be succinct about it, I was working on two books at the same time. The first, The Age of Phillis, is about Phillis Wheatley Peters, as we call her now. And then the other was Love Songs. And so I had been writing short stories based upon people just in my imagination from Central Georgia. And as I kept doing specific research on 18th century African Americans, I was really fascinated by them. And initially, this was just supposed to be a beach read about Ailey. And then as I kept, spent years, the book took 11 and a half years, I wanted to see what was the nascent moment of how this Black family of mixed race heritage, but they are Black presenting and they are proud to be Black, how they began. And that took me to the history of a particular place. I don't find any shame in slavery. I'm actually proud to be descendant from enslaved people because you know, when you see what we have accomplished, it's clear that we were extraordinary. So I wanted to sort of talk about this, and that's sort of the nutshell.
Wow. Well, I can tell you, as a fellow writer, I want us to talk a little bit about the craft and pacing of writing. All three books are different. Sometimes you have to make a decision about whether to be chronological or to stay in the past and the present. Vanessa, I want to start with you because literally I'm roaming through, and then all of a sudden I'm in the present, and then I'm in the past a little bit. All of it just, it worked. Talk a little bit about the decisions you made about how to present the story.
Dorothy's story, even though there are, I would like to say, heroic moments. I don't consider her a hero, but there are heroic moments in her story. But there's also pain in her story. Her story is what we have come to understand in America of what enslavement looks like. West Indian enslavement is a little bit different. The average life cycle was 34 years. The climate, the bugs, you name it, and then the absurd levels of cruelty in order to control the chattel makes it a very difficult story. So I wanted to take my readers on this journey, but I needed you to know that Dorothy survived this. So we start with Dorothy as an older woman. You can tell she has money. You can tell that she's got a problem that she has to solve. And she's in London, away from her home, which is, once again, being able to travel from Demerara, which is below the equator, all the way to London, shows you the significant means of this and access and agency of this woman. So when I take you back to the hard times, when she was enslaved, when she was brutalized by her half brother, incest, et cetera, she survives it. So I want to make sure my readers feel safe. I have a lot of readers that come from my romance books who are curious about the enslavement story from the West Indian perspective, but yet there are a lot of people, and I think Honorée touched on this. There's a stigma about enslavement. There's a shame, even though you had nothing to do with it. You didn't control it. You feel a legacy of shame because your ancestors went through this. This is a woman who went through all this and survived. I want more stories of survival. I want more stories where we found power and agency and bringing that to the forefront. But once again, knowing where my readers are coming from and into this different world, I want you to be safe, because there are potential triggers in this type of story. But knowing that she survived it, you know that you can survive anything, because this woman was just that phenomenal.
Well, I can tell you as a reader, I thank you for it, because knowing from the very beginning, no matter what was coming, she was there and powerful. That helped me. But when you talk about the pain, you mentioned the pain. I'm going to read just this one quote, which literally I was ready to put on a t-shirt as soon as I read it. Grief doesn't let you choose. It comes for you. This evening has to go on. It's bigger than me, Sells. It's bigger. Colored girls don't get second chances to shine. And that was after getting some news that we won't discuss because I don't do spoilers, but I said, look at that. See, that's that strength. That's that, I'm going to do what I need to do. And that was pretty amazing. I want to ask you the same question, Wanda. Talk a little bit about how you knew with the pacing, and because this is a thriller, this is an intellectual thriller. Some thrillers are juicy, some thrillers are beach reads. This was an intellectual thriller that was also juicy. How did you decide how you were going to pace it and have the story move?
Sure. So for me, I wanted to tap into and go deeper into Elise Littlejohn's character. She is a very complicated Black woman, as we all are. And one of the things that I wanted to make sure that I tapped into was her strength. And as Vanessa talked about, her agency. So even as a 14-year-old girl, she devises a plan to get herself out of poverty and save her little brother in the process. Now, it may not be a plan that everyone would choose, but it's a plan nonetheless. And so in order to do that, I wrote the story in dual timelines so that I could open up her backstory. And she makes some very questionable decisions as an adult. But when you look at her backstory and what she survived, you come to understand, oh, it makes sense now. Now I understand why, for example, calling the police is not her first go-to move. When, she discovers a dead body, and this is not a spoiler because it's on the opening pages of the book. She walks into the executive suite and she finds her boss dead with a gunshot. And Miss Littlejohn politely flips off the light and closes the door. And so you are immediately into this book, like, what in the world is she doing? She doesn't call the authorities. She goes right back to her office and she lets somebody else bring the news of his death. But all of that sets up the story for what this woman survived as a 14-year-old girl growing up in poverty.
It was fantastic. And I think it might have been what I would do. You never know in that instance.
You
but
never
You just never know. But I want to share one little passage about Elise and her posse. Her little triumvirate, Lana, Grace, and Elise, was still hanging on from college. Of the three of us, Lana was the one always trying to patch us up from the dings and bruises we suffered navigating life, dusting us off and sending us back out into the world. Grace was the one always trying to get us to do Jell-O shots and detoxifying spa wraps, like we were taking our last gasp of youth before stepping into that otherness called middle age. If I were in trouble, Lana would bring a casserole to my house and help me find a good lawyer. Grace would bring a gallon of bleach, a tarp, and a couple of shovels. That's my favorite passage. And of all the things, all the twists and turns that I could not put it down, I read that 19 times. And I said, that's the one I have to call up all my posse and say, okay, listen to this and go get this book where this is the sister in this book. Honorée, I want to turn to the same thing with you because, oh my God, this is one of those masterpieces that this is not a beach read and this is not a thriller, although there are thrilling things in it. This is one of those things that you can tell it's a life's work, even if you do 19 other things. Talk a little bit about why you decided it would be what it would be and the structure that you chose and the characters.
Well, originally, like I said, this was just supposed to be about Ailey. And then, and I've spoken about this before, I started having dreams of people. A lot of my past work, like now, I'm used to the dreams. But this was, I was still in, I think, I was in my early 40s or something like that. And so I started having these dreams of people where I knew it was set in the past. I knew it was in the past. There was a big plantation house in the background. And then there were people who were wearing kind of old-fashioned clothes. And then when they would speak to me, they sort of reminded me, when I woke up and I could recall it, they reminded me of the very old people that I recalled from my childhood. Ma Sweet, who was my great-grandmother, and there were other very old people, and they spoke in different language. That's one of the things in the book where you see people who are in the same town, but generations have different vocabularies depending on how far out they are from enslavement. And so when I would wake up, I would have these long passages that would come to me, and I would write them down, sort of chasing behind them before they would disappear. And at first I thought it was two separate novels. And I had, someone that I was dear friends with, we're no longer dear friends, to say, this is pretentious. and you need to, and then later on, not my agent, she's always been very supportive. We've been together for 17 years, but they would say, this is two separate novels. They would say, well, there's a slave narrative, which is not a slave narrative. That actually begins with Native American history, but there's a slave narrative, and then there's a contemporary. And so it took about 4 years for me to figure out that this was part of the same book. And then it was a hot mess for, a couple, 3 more years. So it took a while. I started writing this probably around 2010-ish, late 2009, early 2010. And that coincidentally was when I decided that I was gonna write this book of poetry on Phillis Wheatley Peters. So that's when I decided. And then the real challenge was how were this contemporary section and this historical section going to connect. I find it very interesting that all three of us have these sort of dual timelines, where we go back and forth. And that's how, all of our readers find out things. It doesn't work for every novel. It works for our novels, but it doesn't work for every novel. But because I deal a lot with history of this particular place, all my stories are about Chickasetta, which is Eatonton, Georgia, which is where Alice Walker is from. And my mother taught Alice Walker. And so it's a very small town, Eatonton. And so, if you're going all the way back to the 18th century and coming to the 21st century, there's all kinds of stuff that you can find. You don't really have to go anyplace else. So.
Wow. Well, I can tell you, I'm not going to read this whole passage, but the tracing of the line, I went in search of my great-great-great-grandfather and finally found him in the North Carolina State Archives in the will of a white attorney. And so there's a point in here where you talk about tracing the history of these people. There will be generations that lie between the people of the place in the middle of the tall trees and their descendants. A woman who will be named Eliza, also called Mima, who will marry Red Benjamin, and you go down all of these characters, and then you get to, and Belle will bear 3 girls, Lydia, Carol, and finally a last daughter, Ailey, who will learn to honor a line reaching back to people whose names she never will know, to praise the blood that calls out in dreams long after memory has surrendered. Yes, just burst right into tears because there's so much that we will never know. And that was just such a powerful way to explain that. I ask this question sometimes because I know for me, it might change. As you were writing just these particular books, were you writing them for yourself because it was a story that needed to come out, whether it was over 1 year or 10 years, or were you writing it for people because it was something you really needed millions of people to know? Wanda, why don't I start with you?
Sure. You know what? It's interesting. I think it is a story that I started out writing for myself. It was sort of a cathartic exercise. But in doing it, I've come to realize that it's a story that I think people need to know. I think people need to understand that there are strong Black women in these predominantly white spaces, a la executive suites, where despite all these accoutrements of success, we still don't bear the power that our white and white male counterparts do. And for me, I've always loved thrillers and mysteries. But, I've got all these books behind me, by men like John Grisham and Scott Turow and Harlan Coben, great books all in their own respect, but they don't speak to me. They don't tell my story. They don't tell stories that resonate with what I experience and what I know to be true. And so I think I set out to write that that I did not see on the shelves. I think it was Toni Morrison who said, write the book that you want to read. And, when you're spending 15, 20 bucks a pop for a book that you get, 300 pages and the end, and you're like, well, that was nice. But if a Black woman were in that book, she would have done X, Y, and Z, or she wouldn't have handled it that way. And I just didn't find those kinds of books with strong, smart, sophisticated Black women who were doing the thing. And so for me, I think it was a little bit of both.
And what about you, Vanessa?
It was to return this woman to the world. Dorothy Kerwin Thomas was famous during that time frame. There are plaques for one of the achievements that she did that has disappeared, a silver plate that other powerful women of color, Black women of means, because she did this feat for them, that she saved basically generational wealth. They honored her with this plaque. The plaque is gone. Dorothy's will is archived in the UK. There are letters from the prince's contemporaries saying, I saw Doll Thomas in Glasgow, Scotland with her 18 grandkids. She brought 18 grandkids from Demerara, all the way below the equator, to Glasgow, Scotland. We can't even go to Walmart with two in the back seat. And you've got this fabulous woman who's gone from the world. So it was an unexpected privilege, because I was doing this research. I did the research for me to answer this question. And so when anybody ever looked at my books and are like, this kid, Black women aren't looked at like that. We're not desired like that. You're supposed to be made. You're supposed to be enslaved. There's no level of agency. I wrote all this for me so I could say, look, here's that woman. She did all that. But when I got the opportunity, my editor, Rachel Kahn of William Morrow, bought at the table when I was just pitching the idea. When I got that opportunity to tell Dorothy's story from her perspective, I didn't hold anything back, because I want the world to know this woman's name. She needs to be in our textbooks.
Yes.
Because little Black girls need to know that we survived and we thrived and we, worked the system and found a better tomorrow because of what she did.
Yeah.
Wow. And Honorée, for you, for yourself or for the audience?
Well, I always write for myself. And so, in particular with this novel, I didn't think anybody was going to buy it. Mm-hmm. And so it was really just about me. There were other people who, I got a nice little advance, but there were other people who were getting 7-figure book advances and who were doing, that I don't know that I'll ever want a 7-figure book advance, because you have to earn out that advance. But I remember, when my editor, Erin Wicks, at Harper, who's now left, and that was heartbreaking. But I always say Erin Wicks is a genius and the world needs to know. Erin, a young white woman, became like my soulmate. When we were writing, when I was writing, revising it, and she would come to me and she would say, okay, I want you to just write as much as you want to. That's what happened. And that's how the book became 800 pages. The book that was sold was 450 pages, and that was long enough. And so I didn't even think that anybody was going to read the book. I really thought it was going to be a white elephant, and that it might, have some critical success, but I didn't think anybody was going to buy it. And so then, when Miss Oprah came, that's when I was like, I still didn't think anybody was going to buy it. I really didn't, even with Miss Oprah. But then I thought about, I knew that people were going to ask me who the book was for and why did I write the book? And I had a couple of before publication day people asking me, you know, why did you feel like you had to write a book about this Black family? And I would, you know, I always try to be gracious now. In my 30s and my 40s, that was different. And so I began to think about it. And the question that I had wanted to answer was, how did we get to this place as a country, as a family, as a region? But when people kept sort of asking me to justify why I had written this very Black book, that's when I began to understand that I had written the book for Black women, and not only Black women, dark brown Black women like myself, who don't see themselves a lot centered. And whether they survived or not, all of them had agency. All of them have voices. People sometimes say, and then I'll wrap up, you know, this gives voice to the voiceless. Everyone has a voice. Just because someone doesn't hear the voice does not mean, and everybody has a choice, even in the midst of the greatest oppression. And so I wanted people to see, and some of these people make it and some of them don't, but it is a woman's book. It's a Black feminist book. And I wanted people to see that.
Absolutely, that was powerful. I am so thrilled to be talking with the three of you, and I want to make sure that our audience knows that they can also do that as well by offering some questions in the Q&A function. We'd love to hear some of your thoughts, and if there's something that you're dying to know from these three genius authors, then just let us know so that we can ask those questions too. I have a question that is near and dear for me, because I tend to have a short attention span if my characters aren't talking to me the right way that day, where I might go and do something else or read something else. What did you read while you were writing this book, and how long like a break would you take from it? I know that may sound weird, but if you're on a mission and you're on a deadline, and of course, you know, every book is on a deadline, can you take a break? But if you did, what did you do and what did you read? Vanessa?
I didn't actually take a break. I was on deadline. It was pandemic, because I sold an idea, not a finished book. And I'm a firm believer, I write every day. For me, if I'm taking a break, it's because I'm going through a research book, or I'm in an archive, an online archive or something, or I've got documents. I'm totally dedicated to the story. And I'm not done until I'm done. And so I'm writing every day. I am forcing myself, because writing is a muscle memory. If you stop, if you begin to prioritize other things, then you'll always prioritize other things. So I get very focused, and I got to get the story out of me, and I've got to revise the story. I've got to shape the story, and I have to check all those darn facts so that, you know, that you could trust what you're reading.
And Honorée, what about you? Did you ever take a break while you were working on this, or did you read other things while you were doing it?
Well, Love Songs is based on history, partially. And so I was also writing another book at the same time. The Age of Phillis took 15 years. I spent 15 years in the archives, and that started in 2003. So I will say I had to take breaks because I was grieving. My mentor, the great poet, Lucille Clifton, she was my mentor, my dear friend, and my second mother. She died in 2010. My best friend died in 2011. My sister died in 2014. Then my marriage ended in 2015. So one of the things that I do as I pivot, I'm working on 2 or 3 projects at the same time. And I'll pivot because I can get very depressed if something I'm doing isn't speaking to me. But one thing that happens is because, at this point, I'm 54 and I've been, my first poem came out in 1997. So I'm kind of, I'm an older person and I've been doing this for a while. So I'm always working on themes that are connected. And so when I pivot, a lot of times I can find out something in another project that I need for the project that's not speaking. And that's what happened. I did a lot of research, both in the archives as well as historical history books for the Age of Phillis. So, yeah.
Wow. And Wanda, what about you?
So my experience is a little different from these ladies. That's why I echo what Honorée said at the top of this conversation. I am really honored to be sitting here beside all 3 of you because this is my very first novel, the very first book I've ever written. So for me, I was reading a lot of things so I could learn how to write a book. I was still working as an attorney. And so I was having to learn about things like characterization and pacing and story structure. And so I read a lot of craft books. And then I read a lot of books in my genre just so that I could know what readers expect, because people come to books with certain expectations. You pick up a romance book, you're not looking for a lot of, shooting or a dead body necessarily. And so I was reading a lot of that. Now, having my first book under my belt, I've always read in other genres, so biographies, poetry, history. So now I find that I can branch out and do that, but my reading was pretty much surrounded by trying to figure out how to write this book. Yeah.
Now we've got some questions from the audience. Sandra Shaw Hardy wants to know, what was the best thing that came out of your book?
Miss Oprah. No, I mean, I really do. I think that, Sister Wanda said something that really resonated to me in terms of being in these all-white spaces. And I've been in these all-white spaces for a really long time, and you get disrespected, there are microaggressions, there are all of that. And I truly believe Miss Oprah is anointed and there's something about when she says, I approve, that people begin. Now, there are still some people that try to disrespect me because, I have a corn pone and molasses accent, and I just kind of carry myself like a regular sister, which I am in some ways. But there was something about when she came that all of a sudden people who had disrespected me began to respect me. And it just was a great blessing, that I was given. So I would say that, and even the way that I looked at myself, I would be saying, do I have a right to demand X, Y, and Z? And then I realized that I did, and there had been other people who had been trying to say that, to me, but when she came into my life, and chose this book, then all of a sudden I believed that I had a right to demand the respect that I hadn't been demanding in certain aspects of my life.
Good for you. Good for you. Wanda, is there something particular that has come out of this besides just a heck of a book?
Thanks. Wow, I gotta speak candidly. This book has literally changed my life. I have been in spaces where people tried to make me feel small and stupid. They have disrespected me. They have maligned my character. And so when I sat down, like I said, to kind of cathartically work all this out, my thought was never to be, serialized in Entertainment Weekly or on the cover of the Library Journal or, Good Morning America Buzz pick. None of that. It was the farthest thing from my mind, because I was trying to put what it's like to be a Black female in these spaces between the covers of a book. And so when all that stuff did happen, I had a moment where, first and foremost, I had to thank God and the ancestors, right? And I thought to myself that these stories matter. These stories matter. And for so long, because I'd had so much rejection on this book, that for so long, I thought, does nobody care? Is there no one who cares about our stories? And so I think for me, all those things have been wonderful, all those things that I've listed, but the fact that the story is out there and it resonates with people. Now look, like you, Honorée, I am not a spring chicken. I ain't gonna tell y'all my age, but know that I have, corns and calluses older than some folks. So for me to have comments from like 20 somethings that come up to me and say, oh, when I read your book, I thought, yes, that's how I feel. When somebody came up and wanted to touch my hair or, those sorts of things. And I'm saying to myself, oh my gosh, that the story resonates and touches people. To me, that is a pretty big deal. That is a pretty big deal.
Well, I want to get to some more of these questions in the Q&A before we run out of time. And I see my dear friend and former colleague at the Free Press, Cassandra Spratling, excellent writer. And her question is, how do you motivate yourself and push yourself if and when self-doubt creeps in?
Kind of to pivot on that and go back to the last question.
Oh, okay.
The biggest thing I got out of this journey was I was dimming my own light. I walked into that pitch meeting and I thought, this is the story that would be acceptable for publishing, to do Dorothy's story as the mistress of Prince William Henry, as the mistress of the king. And it took someone else, my lovely editor, Rachel, to say, no, I want this woman's story. I had purposely walked in there thinking that nobody cared, just like Wanda said, nobody cares about a woman's journey. Nobody wants another story of enslavement. Nobody wants I put all these things on my shoulders instead of just going with my gut knew that this was an important story to tell and that I was the one to tell it. Because those are two things that I think all Black female writers struggle with, knowing the story and knowing that they are the ones to tell this story. Right. So for me, it is, I'm an overachiever, I'm an overperformance person, but I was dimming my light. So I have to make those checks now. Am I telling the story like it should be told? And I am entitled to tell the stories that I want to tell. Those are the two biggest things for me.
Wow. And that's getting to Cassandra's question a little bit, because now you might have a different way of dealing with self-doubt than you would have had if that person had not pushed you to write the real story, the story about the woman. That's amazing. We have a wonderful comment here from Ken Warner. Thank you for one of the most interesting and inspirational NWS events I have ever attended. I realize you were writing for an audience of Black females, but this old white guy feels compelled to read all 3 books. So thank you, Ken. And we've got a question from Marilyn Grant, who wants to know what rule of thumb was used in deciding how much detail to include in the story when your story is based on actual people and events. So of course that's for you, Vanessa, because oh my God, you did all of this research, and how do you not use everything?
I'm a stickler because this goes back to that dimming light. I know that my work is going to be judged a little bit more harshly. I know that people are going to, I love the reviews that say, I Googled it and she was right. I know the audience, and I know when you bring a story that hasn't been told before, that there's doubt. And so I'm going to answer that, and I'm going to put it in, if I deviate, it's in the author's note, but I'm a stickler, and I want you to feel like you're there. So I'm going to put in enough detail so you can feel it, taste it, touch it, because that's my job, to deliver you from the present world to back to the time frame, the 1750s to 1830s. You're going to be there if you read my book.
Right.
The first, I guess, 100 pages. I mean, I deal with the actual indigenous, Afro-Indigenous history of Georgia. So, yeah, I'm with Vanessa. For me, because I knew African-American history a lot, having spent so much time in it. But Native American history was something that I was very scared. I knew that I would get dragged by Native American folks if I didn't get it right. And so that was what was most concerning to me. I knew about about Demerara sugar. I knew about, all of that. But that was Native American history, and Red Black Studies, Afro-Indigenous history is still a very small, very tiny field. Although we do have people like Taya Miles, who just recently won the National Book Award, not for a Native American, but she does Red Black studies. And so, her work was invaluable for me.
I do want
If
to.
I could just touch on that, because even though I'm not writing historical, I was writing about what happens with a lawyer. And lawyers are infamous for wanting to climb into your DMs and tell you, you got that point wrong. Lawyers don't do this. So I had to make sure that, particularly when I was dealing with some of the illegal activities that go on in the book. So I actually did my research and worked with another lawyer who specializes in white collar crime to make sure I got all the details right. It's important, because Vanessa's right. People love to point out, that doesn't happen. That's not right. So they do it even in fictional.
My favorite is when they use a TV show to tell you the history.
Oh, gosh,
like the TV show is correct.
Wikipedia, they don't really understand. Wikipedia is not a scholarly source. I had someone on Goodreads, I mentioned, no spoilers, I won't say who it is, in the book, but saying Fanny Kimball. And they said, well, there's no way that any English woman in the 19th century would be named Fanny. And I'm like, sweetie, Fanny Kimball was an actual person. So yeah, people really, I have had people email me with a list of typos.
Yes, I think I finally arrived as an author, because I got an email and the woman told me, you spelled this word incorrectly. Well, I'll tell you guys, the word I used in the book was sketch. And if you read the book, you realize it's slang, and it's a term that she was using to refer to her brother's friends.
Right. Yes.
Sketch. And she says, you meant the word sketchy, but you use sketch. And I was just like, what does she think I would do with this? Am I supposed
Why did she write her own book?
Exactly. Like, what am I
It's
supposed to
your
say?
own book, and then you can spell these words however you feel like, baby.
Exactly. Then you can use
Welcome
sketch.
aboard. Welcome aboard, Wanda.
Thank you.
You arrived.
Thank you
You've
very much.
arrived.
Right.
You've
That's
arrived.
right.
I do want to tell you that Anthony Hightower wanted you to know that this old Black man thanks you as well. So I wanted you to get that.
Thank you.
Know who Anthony
Mr.
Hightower is?
Hightower.
Anthony Hightower is my husband. Thank you.
Oh.
Sweetie. Thank you, sweetie.
Aw.
We might be able to squeeze in one more, and this was important to me because it's something that I do. Ann Osmer wanted to know, you're all inspirational. The question is, do you write from an outline? So if we could quickly just get to whether you did that or not, that would really help a lot of writers. Honorée.
Essays, yes. The book of essays that I'm writing now, yes, I have a bare outline. Fiction, no. I just get in where I fit in, and then I arrange as I go.
Go ahead, Wanda.
Well, for me, I do a very loose outline because I'm writing mystery. I need to know kind of where to plant the red herrings and the clues. And so I do a very loose outline. And by loose, I mean, like, I kind of know what the opening scene will be, kind of what the climax will be, things like that, very loose.
You don't want to lose the body, so that is important.
Right, exactly.
Very important. I go from a very detailed outline. So I have a timeline, Aeon timeline for those of you stay at home, Aeon, AEON timeline from 1750 to 1830. And it has everything that ever happened in the world during those timeframes from all the different perspectives of the countries, the people, and whatnot. And then from there, I target my whatever I'm writing and start from there. Because the world was a lot smaller, and
Yes.
and communications was very, much smaller. You knew what was happening from different perspectives, different stories.
Western world was a
Right.
lot smaller. European world was a lot smaller. Yeah.
We're gonna
And the West Indies. This is what people don't understand, because the happenings in Haiti, the revolution, you find Cuban papers that are talking about it. You'll talk about Philadelphia papers. So the world is
But
much
I'm
more
talking
formed.
about indigenous people and West African people. The world is big. The documentation is small.
That is
I
true.
didn't mean to. It's just,
end with a beautiful comment from Josephine Arrowwood Ross, who said, I am so grateful to each of you for bringing great writing to the table, not just for Black readers, but also for all of us readers. Thank you, thank you, thank you for letting us enter your novel worlds. And Yvonne Sage says, thank you, Wanda, Vanessa, and Honorée. You're an inspiration for all women. And Pamela Green says, brava, brava, brava. And I say the same thing. Thank you for spending some time with me for the National Series. I loved it. I love your books, and I can't wait for the next things that you're going to do, which I didn't ask about. We're going to wait till you tell us.
Good evening. It's me again. I want to say thank you to Honorée, Wanda, Vanessa, and Rochelle. We are so fortunate to have spent the past hour with you. We hope all of you watching enjoyed the discussion and encourage you to continue the conversation by picking up their books from your favorite independent bookstore. We also like to extend another heartfelt thanks to all of our partners and sponsors. And to you, our viewers, we are so grateful. The proceeds from our events go to the National Writer Series Raising Writers programs to help share the love of reading and writing with children from grade school through high school throughout the 5-county region. Your support makes all the difference. Please check out nationalwriterseries.org for more information on upcoming events. Hope to see you next time. Thank you and have a good night.